Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Everyone here with Ashley Hicks-Pastrom, Joe Courtney. Everyone.
Blah.
Boo.
What's up?
He didn't
Start
say
off with a
boo. He
boo?
said boo.
I said hello. Hello.
Hello. Oh,
Hello.
must be some of that lag I'm getting there from your green room. All right, we're not getting into the study. We're not getting straight to the science today. We are bringing something back we haven't done in a while. We're going to update the world on our lives because we know everyone is just on the edge of their seats waiting to hear from us and how things are going. And so let's hear from Kyle.
Dadgummit. I knew it. I knew it was going to pick me. Well,
How's life, Kyle?
life is grand. Things are going well. Still doing house projects, which I think we were doing house projects.
There's no
Back
way.
when we
Let's
stopped
hear it.
up here. There's one behind me, actually. That's our new garage door that still hasn't been put up. So that one's
Yeah, I think we have
next.
YouTube documentation that's been there for months.
it's been there for a few episodes, actually. So anyway, other than that, things are going well. Yeah, that's it.
All right, house
Now
projects.
that you're allowed to celebrate the Christmas spirit because even though you're late.
Yeah, it's past Thanksgiving, so yeah, I can celebrate Christmas now.
Well, technically, he decorated before Thanksgiving, so
I did decorate before Thanksgiving this year.
He cheated.
So. I didn't put up our outdoor lights until after Thanksgiving, so those went up last weekend. But our indoor stuff
Okay.
went up beforehand.
Pro tip: never take them down.
I might go with that strategy this time. Because it seems to get more and more every year.
That's what my neighbor does. They only wrap their beams, like the columns on their front porch, and they just never take them down. But then they add a bow to it come Christmas time. And then
that's actually
It's the
that's
gift
winning.
that keeps on giving.
yeah,
That's winning
just
right
leave them on there.
there. I love it. So I get to pick, right?
You do.
I'm picking Jerred.
You can't pick
Oh,
Joe. Joe, you're next.
Okay. Well,
It's not ultimate
Deflection.
power. It's a little bit of power, Kyle, but it's not ultimate power.
you just
Great.
booted. Sorry, Kyle was breaking up. We couldn't hear him on that. Awesome. I don't know when was the last time we got an update, but probably since the last update is when I hit my squat goal, my 405. It was like
Nice.
2 or 3 weeks ago. So that's what I was working toward for the past year on strength and my emphasis and focus for the year. And I needed to hit it before we come on vacation because I haven't really worked out or lifted a weight while on vacation because we're staying in in-laws places and family and there just isn't a gym to go
Listeners,
to.
cover your ears.
Yeah. I
Joe's
didn't say I
working out every
didn't do
day.
anything. I still work out, but I'm not exactly, I can't squat.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah.
Like, I haven't done anything with weights except for at your place. And we did curls. So
Hey, it was programmed on Hard to Kill. We just were following Hard to Kill programming.
the only thing weighted that we had that day. So, hit my 400. So pretty stoked about that. Now I can change my focus to the next one, to the next thing. So,
Do you know what that is yet?
I'm gonna try and maintain and then up my run because I still wanted to get sub 6 minute mile. But it just kind of fell off to the side because I know I needed to hit the squat. And also it's really, really hard to run when it's 120 degrees outside in Bahrain. So yeah, but now I'll be moving to Monterey, which I can run outside all year long as it's not raining. And
That's probably a big update nobody knows about, right? Joe's coming back to the U.S.
Oh, that's
Why
that's
is
the
that,
next
Joe?
one. Because that's just what happens in life.
Okay.
All right, awesome.
Oh, and I guess Liz is pregnant too. So
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
There it
Yeah.
is.
all these things happen.
Lots of big updates. We
There-
throw in the
there's-
405. Okay, baby. It's
Moving back to the
somewhere
States in
in there.
January. Yeah. Kyle, see, you need to have that air fryer ready, a new one to buy, or some sort of kitchen gadget.
Just updated the kitchen, so we need new
He's
gadgets
like-
now.
There it
He's on
is.
his 5th air fryer.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Well, Joe did something awesome again. I got another air fryer. I don't know what I'm gonna do with all these things.
It's just my day to catch all the crap today, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
We're doing updates again. That's what happens. I'm remembering now.
yeah.
I always had crappy updates. So that's
Yeah, 405 is awesome. So glad I hit that, and now I can just maintain and
Yeah.
focus on other things.
Congrats all around. Goals
All right.
achieved. Big news. Big life changes. It's awesome
Things
stuff.
happen. All right, so I will pick not Jerred.
Yeah.
It's funny you brought up an air fryer because my best friend just got me that for my Christmas gift on Black Friday. So there you
Yeah,
go.
there it is. See,
There it
somebody got
is.
one.
I got one. I know. And speaking of house projects, we updated our backyard and it's finally officially finished as of this morning. Scott put down the last couple bags of mulch, so now we can enjoy it for 7 more months because the Air Force finally let us know when we're leaving. So we're going to stay in Florida for 7 more months. We'll transition. We'll go to Randolph. It's official. It's great. He had to do his out processing. It's not out processing. It's like a course of like, this is how you get a job in the civilian world. And
The resume writing, yeah.
yeah, which was
Oh,
kind of
that's
funny
all,
to
but
him.
Yeah.
He got to, because he has a job going for, he got to like skip one day, which was, I guess, the day of like, this is how you apply for a job. This is how you, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, that's the biggest news. We're moving in June. We're staying here, traveling for the holidays. So I get to pull out that one-man system stuff again. It's going to be great. Anyways,
That's awesome.
Jerred, go, good sir.
Yeah, I'm in Kyle's camp. I don't have a lot of good updates. I think the office is finished. I think we covered it at some point. If anyone was sitting on the edge of their seat for that, the office is finished. Kyle was guest 001, if I have that correct. So he has that on his list. Joe refused to stay here this past week, and then he did get in the cold. I offered it. I was like 9 different times. Like, you just stay here, and he's like, no.
So would I have slept on the floor next to your sons or next to Eleanor?
Well, it's funny. I was like, he must have like this awesome setup, somewhere else. And he's like, no, we're sharing like a single bed and child bedroom. And I was like, why don't you just come here? Like, can't do it. I'm like, all right, that's fine. But anyway, my update is Joe. Joe did the cold plunge in the sauna, which
And the
awesome.
sauna?
Longer than Kyle.
Yeah, he did both. Yeah,
Oh my
he was
gosh.
in at a lower temperature and for more time than Kyle, just so we're throwing that out there. And then the asterisk to that is Kyle only did what I instructed him to do. The temperature was what it was. He didn't have control over that. I gave him a recommended time. So I'm sure Kyle could go colder and longer, but we'll just throw it out there.
100%.
Every visit, my brother's got the record right now. Joe, you were here for that. He stayed in for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
He was like, he came out like shivering. And I was like, how long were you in there? He's like, 10 minutes. And I was like, it's like 48 degrees. I don't know. Like, how do you just, he's like, after like 5 minutes, I just get numb. And then I stayed in there. So.
All right. Well, Joe, challenge accepted. But we all know that females are more mentally tough than men, so it'll be fine.
We also said that you would say that anyway. So.
All right.
Oh.
I think
We're
I'm
not
looking at plane
competitive
ticket. I'll be
here.
out there next week.
Yeah.
We're not
I'm
a
setting a new
competitive
record.
crew or anything.
And so to the listener, should we keep the updates or bypass the updates or
Yeah. How are you liking this experience?
Yeah, exactly.
periodically? If this is your first time to the podcast, I'm sorry. You're just like, what did I walk into? I thought we were talking about back squats. And that is what we're talking about today. We're talking
I
about
talked about back squats. I'm just saying.
back squats. Yeah, he did mention
Wow.
it. So it's a perfect segue into the study. So the study was done in 2021. The name is Effects of Stance Width and Barbell Placement on Kinematics, Kinetics, and Myoelectric Activity in Back Squats. There were 9 men, 9 women in the study. They performed back squats with 4 different techniques, such as high bar, narrow stance, high bar, wide stance, low bar, narrow stance, low bar, wide stance. So those were all the different stances. If you're unfamiliar with these stances, I mean, I kind of think it's funny that this is covered and that it is an item of discussion in the fitness world, but it really is. We're talking about maybe like 3-inch, max 4-inch difference on where the bar goes on your back. Like that's it between high bar and low bar. If you're going much lower than that, it's rolling off your back. You can't hold it on there anymore. And so that's all we're talking about. We're talking about this narrow margin here of where the bar should be placed on your back. It's a huge debated topic in the squatting world. We've covered it before. But then there's also stance, which I think is more something better to cover overall than like exactly where the bar goes. So should you take a narrow stance? Should you take a wide stance? Most of my, let's say, opinions of that come from coaching, come from personal stuff, and come from what I've heard from other coaches, and not so much science. So it is cool to be able to jump into the science on covering all this stuff. The big reason they wanted to go over it, I always jump into the why, is they're saying that a lot of studies cover the sticking region, but not a lot over how these different variations could increase your performance. So that was the main reason they wanted to jump into it. I won't jump into the findings because I think they're kind of weak. So I'll throw it to you guys first and just hear what your thoughts are on the different squat methods in this study in particular. So Ashley, what do you think?
Oh, whoa, Joe normally goes first.
Yeah,
This is weird.
I threw it to you.
All right. I said it wasn't surprising to me that they brought up the low bar wide stance. Sorry, I'm going to have to like.
Yeah, it's hard with all the acronyms they use.
Yeah. The low bar wide stance had more like hip contribution to the movement, which made sense to us, right? Like if you are wider, your butt's going to sit back. You're going to be focused more on your kind of glutes and your hamstrings versus if you have a more narrow stance, it's obviously going to be more focused towards your quads, your knees, as they talked about. But for the wide stance, both the low bar narrow stance as well as the high bar narrow stance had the 2 greatest loads, I guess, out of all. That's what they came to conclusion, right? The low bar narrow stance followed closely by the high bar narrow stance. And it was only like, it said 3 kilograms. So it's only like 6.6 pounds, right? So it's like not even a massive difference. I think for this, it's basically like, what are you trying to target? Like, what is like, are you trying to target your glutes or your hammies today or whatnot? One thing I did want to bring up though, they talked about, so there was men and women in the study and they talked about the kinematics of it, how there was no difference between, I'm assuming the velocity of the difference of the men and the women going up and down, like their sticking points is what they were talking. And I've always just, have you ever heard that like women get down and get up faster than men? Have y'all ever heard that?
That's not something that's
scientific. Anyways, I always wonder if maybe it's a height thing then, like because we're obviously shorter than you guys.
Well, that would make sense. Like you could do burpee faster than I could probably.
Right. Which again, you have more to get down and more to get back up. But anyways, so I guess my killing comfort would be maybe switch up your stances when you do some back squats and not always, now obviously practice, right? If you're going from a high bar to a low bar, don't hurt yourself, give it a go, give it a shot. But this really helped Scott with his squat. He was not able to get to parallel. He's got all sorts of mobility issues. And yes, I'm calling out my husband, but he, did some research on it and was able to basically, he does a low bar narrow stance, if you will. And, you know, it's like right at a little bit above, a little bit past his hips is where his stance is. So I don't necessarily, that was my other thing. Did they like define how narrow the narrow stance was? They did, Kyle? Okay.
Yeah, they measure, it was per person. They measured, they had a unit of measurement that they would use to make it specific for each person based on their natural stance.
Perfect.
Yeah, and they had it in the like list of participants, like the 4 inclusion criteria, and one of them was like being able to hit international powerlifting standards on the back squat depth or something like that.
On the depth, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Getting below parallel.
Perfect. Which I loved. I love that they had a depth standard for that too. But for Scott, his problem was just where the barbell was. And once he practiced a bit with the low bar position, that's where he can naturally get to parallel, even below parallel. For me, I have high bars always been the way that I like to go. It just feels more natural to me. I don't know why. Yeah, that would be my killing comfort, is maybe switch your stances on this and do a couple warm-up sets before you go crazy. Kyle, what did you have?
I had all the points that you just covered. Yeah, I just echo that. The low bar wide stance was is better to build strength in your hips and your glutes, and the narrow stance is better for your knees and your ankles. And so really just kind of taking stock of what your goal is, what you're trying to train for the day, maybe where your weakest point is. And that's something else, is that like Jerred said, they were talking about sticking point, right? And those of us who have squatted before, or especially squat regularly, we know that once there's not really much of a sticking point until you get to heavier loads. So once you get like above 75%, I would say, to 80 up to 90 or 95%, that's where the sticking region comes in. Anything lower than that, you're not really going to have much of a sticking point, because it's going to be a light enough load where you can go up and down without having that stop, unless you're doing a lot of reps and you get really tired. But so that's what they're looking at, is they were doing 3 rep maxes and doing heavier loads, so that they could study specifically that sticking point. It wasn't just the squat in general. They were really trying to look at the sticking point and whether these different factors change the sticking point for people on the squat, which I thought was interesting. Not just looking at the squat in general, but also but looking at this particular spot and which bar position and which stance width is going to help you the most in that sticking region, which is really where the money's at when it comes to the squat, because that's where are you strong or not when it's time to stand it back up. That's the real kicker with the back squat. So, and it talked a lot about there was a whole lot of like technical stuff in this study. Like this is a whole lot to cover. But I kind of find it interesting, the things that they were looking at. Like they were talking about, they set up ways to measure the lateral forces. Somehow they had some kind of machine that could measure, like watch people while they were squatting and like measure the lateral forces, like the way they were pushing out against the ground, and like the way that the force they were generating was affecting the ground around them, which also went into determining which stance width was better, which I thought that was really interesting to me, because I was just like, how are we determining, which stance is better or which stance width is better? But they were actually looking even that deep into it, of like how you're actually affecting the ground. And I thought that was an interesting thing to pull out too, of you as you're training and you're squatting, think about the fact that you're affecting the ground, and think about the fact that you're driving force into the ground while you're squatting. And I think that's something that you can really think about as well when you're squatting to get better. But that's really pretty much it. The takeaways were, it depends on what you're training, but this is what you need to do based on what you're trying to accomplish with your squatting. Joe.
Yeah. So if you are a data nerd, or, in exercise science or a PT or something, I would recommend checking this out, because the amount of data is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you want to picture the study, picture Ivan Drago working out with a bunch of scientists and schematics, just watching him work out with electrodes hooked up. That's basically how they did the squat. They tracked the velocity of the bar. They had electrodes hooked up to all the muscles to when they fire and how much. They had 3D imaging to watch them and all of these things, craziness. So really, really cool. Most of it, I don't know what to do with. It's beyond me of what to do with.
Yeah.
But there was still a lot of cool stuff with it. And it was kind of surprising to me that the narrower stance lifted more. But how I interpreted it was narrower stance lifted the most load. So I think that was total load. But like the heaviest weight on the bar, I thought that was wide stance. And that's what I would, at least if I had to have a hypothesis, wide stance, low bar would be the absolute heaviest weight on the bar lift, but narrower stance might be greatest load overall. And that kind of coincides with how I lift. So I think I do high bar and narrow stance for the most part. But I think once I get above 90%, I shift the bar just a little bit down, kind of like a mid bar, and widen my stance just a little bit, just to make sure I'm hitting my glutes so that it's not coming forward, to make sure the bar load is put mostly on my posterior chain versus toward the front, because I just know my back is strong enough to take that load. And that is one of the things that we talked about. So we've already gone over low bar versus high bar in episode 89. I don't think you mentioned that yet, but we did that before. And this one is talking about low, high, and the bar and the feet position. So I've actually tweaked my stance during squatting sessions, between squatting sessions. And I think it can be good to mix it up if you feel confident enough. But if you're still working things out, then this is some of these points of the study are good to figure out, because of either, okay, first I need to make sure that I'm hitting depth. Okay, so what stance, what bar position is going to do that for me? Okay, and then after that, after you're squatting for a while, look at what your sticking point is. One of the things I found that high bar wide stance had the lowest sticking point. So if you're coming up out of the bottom of your squat and you stall early instead of like a little bit through, then you might need to shorten your stance and narrow it a little bit, because the wider high bar stance had the lowest sticking point. And it's just a very small nuanced thing that they found, but it could make a difference, especially if you're trying to work on your squat, trying to get better at it. Things to consider. A little more about the study. The men had to lift 1.5 times their body weight. Women had to lift 1 time their body weight, which I thought was cool, because they're actually like experienced lifters throughout the study to hit the depth. Yeah. Throughout the study, to hit the depth, they had like 3 warm-up preliminary, like getting acclimated to what they were doing session, right, which was cool. So they knew what the heck was going on. And as they measured their squat depth, they had a band under their hamstring. And once they had to hit the hamstring every single time, so that they knew they were hitting their depth, and they couldn't come up until they did that. And then something that was also interesting to me was how they adjusted the load throughout. So they calculated the velocity, and they would do 3 rep max sets, and then they would adjust their load based off of their last rep velocity to make it a certain point, so that they would add anywhere from 1 to 10 kilograms or take away, so that they would keep a certain velocity to hit certain max, to make sure that 3 rep max was what they wanted, which was kind of interesting and pretty in depth, but kind of cool. It's kind of reminds me of a couple weeks ago when we did the load adjusted, how they did that when they calculated maxes. I forgot what that one was, but we just did a couple weeks ago, pretty recently. So changing up your stance and how it can differ. When you low bar, you're going to be bent forward more, so it's going to tighten your hamstrings and your glutes and your posterior chain more and activate those more. Higher bar, you're going to do a little bit more of the front. And I think it's good to mix it up, because all of those things can contribute to improving your back squat, and finding what works best for you and how you move and how your muscles fire is it's pretty important. That's one of the biggest things of improving what you're lifting, is making sure everything's firing right, and make sure it's all driving together. If one thing happens before another, then it's going to throw off the whole chain. So I guess I don't think we've gotten. Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll wrap up mine there to see what Jerred has to say. But really in depth, almost too much information, but still really, really cool for what they did.
I mean, to be honest, I can't add a lot from the study to what has already been said. The ultimate takeaway was and just reading it straight from the study, our findings suggest that training with a high bar, narrow stance could be beneficial when targeting the knee extensors and plantar flexors, whereas low bar, wide stance could be beneficial when targeting the hip extensors. And that's useless to me. It's just like, it's just absolutely useless. Takeaway, even though the study was so in-depth and they did so much, like to your point, Joe, you can't really look at the study and like, find a flaw in the execution of what they did. They did measure so many different things, and they did it, and they made sure depth was there and everything else. And so I guess I'm just going to go to like kind of my takeaways and my opinions on this. I said in episode 89, I'll say it again. To me, high bar versus low bar is like comparing conventional deadlift and sumo deadlift. They're just different. Like you use them, different people of different sizes typically use them. So if you have like long femurs or you're a taller person, poor ankle mobility, you're going to want to be doing low bar back squat. That's just how it is. When you look at a power lifter, they're all doing low bar, a wide stance for the most part. And I don't know many people who want to emulate a power lifter, like, oh, you know what? I want to just be exactly like you, and I always give power lifters a hard time or whatever. Like, cool, you can lift a lot of weight, but you can't bend over and touch your toes. You can't do a pull-up. You have no mobility. Like, these are not cool things that you should pursue for strength. So this is a big reason I don't like it. From anecdotally and, what I've seen, low bar, wide stance you'll move the most weight, like period. But I feel like high bar, narrow squat, high bar, I don't think I've ever done high bar, wide stance before, to be honest. I think that's of the combinations, that's one I probably haven't tried. But anything high bar is just slightly more athletic to me in nature. But I would say it depends on if you actually are a sports athlete, I would consider what you're doing. Like if you're a baseball player, I think that having really powerful hips and a wider stance for batting, you probably want to consider some low bar, wide stance, right? Like I feel like that would translate. I know some guys have a narrower stance. So it's like, oh, okay, well then maybe they should do that. But there's a lot of hip involved in like swinging mechanics. So any sport that has swinging, you're going to want to strengthen the hips. That's just something to note. Maybe you have a teenager, you're listening to this, who you're trying to train or whatever, and you want to try and get them stronger in that. So anything swinging mechanics, you're going to want to have stronger hips. But anything else athletically inclined is typically going to have a narrower stance. Like if there's jumping involved or anything dynamic, you're going to have a narrow stance just naturally, to include sprinting and jumping and everything else. So you just really have to consider what you want. Then if you're an athlete, like a garage gym athlete like us, and you just want to be well-rounded, I'll say what Ashley says, just like mix it up, like try different things. Like, one thing that Louis Simmons from Westside Barbell, their method is essentially there's max effort days and then there are dynamic effort days. So there are days that you're lifting a maximum load, and then there are days you're lifting that load for speed. And we use a lot of that in our programming. One thing that people often overlook or don't understand about this max effort day is on max effort squat day, they don't do the same squat. Like today would be low bar, wide stance. Then next week, we're not doing that again. It's still max effort, but it's a different thing. And they do this, like they might not see low bar, wide stance again for 16 weeks. And so it's very different than how people execute it. And I see people execute what the Westside method incorrectly all the time, and they get burnt out because they're not actually following what Louis Simmons said. So my point there being, try it all. Like try all of the different variations, high bar, narrow stance, high bar, wide stance, low bar, narrow stance, low bar, wide stance, get new 1 rep maxes for them, see how they feel, see if it, plays differently with you and your mobility, and maybe one feels better. I know when we were doing BCT, I tried to move to low bar, wide stance, because I knew just from everything I'd seen, I'd be able to move the most weight. And I cared about just enough depth for it to count, but that's it. I'm not trying to impress anybody with my ass touching my heels or anything like that with 500 pounds on my back. I just wanted enough depth for it to count and stand back up. And so the bar has to travel less distance if it's lower down your back. Because you're basically if you've seen some of these powerlifters are basically bending over and standing back up. It's like, it doesn't even look like a squat compared to what we would do. And that's what I was doing. But it was I've been doing high bar, narrow stance for 15 plus years. to try and change my stance with really heavy weight, all of a sudden it was impossible. I even tried for a couple of weeks and I just couldn't do it. It was too ingrained. Like I could not lift more weight that way because of how accustomed I was to lifting weight a different way. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try these new things. I just found what's comfortable with me. And another thing on their depth, I think if people would have gone just a little bit lower, they would have seen more hamstring and glute activation independent of the stance or bar placement. Right. Because after you go below a certain depth, which would count in powerlifting, but if you go lower than that, which a lot of us do, your quads can't do anything anymore. Yep. Your ass and your hamstrings have to take over to get you out of the hole if you go really low. And so that's the only thing I did think that they probably miss. And you would see, because that's the first thing, like if I see someone not squatting low enough and you get them squatting lower, their hamstrings are going to be sore. Their ass is going to be sore. These are just the things that are going to happen because they're not accustomed to doing it. And then once they start getting a little bit lower. So my killing comfort would be focus on ultimate depth beyond what lifting depth is. If you're like, oh, well, there's more muscle activation here, just go a little bit lower. I think you're going to be okay, no matter your stance or bar placement. And then my second one was just kind of know who you are. Like if you have poor ankle mobility and you are a taller person, like don't try and force yourself into this, high bar, narrow stance. It just doesn't work. It's like, it's never going to work until you either fix your mobility or get shorter, which is kind of hard to do. And so just go with a back squat that feels comfortable. And that's the biggest thing is you should not finish squatting and be like, oh, that hurt, or my knees hurt 3 days after I squat. Like those things are not normal. So figure it out and experiment around. That's ultimately all I got on that one. We good? You guys want to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Topic. Book, The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman. That's all I got to say. Let's
oh no.
Let's dive into it. We'll give our barbell rating for it. So this book was ultimately about how your alter ego can be your secret weapon. And once you fully embody this version of your alter ego, you can reach your full potential. That was kind of the premise behind the book. There's a lot in here, a lot. I actually took a lot of notes, more than normal. I think because I didn't like the book, but I also liked it at the same time. I have a very, and I'll get into it, but that's it. I'm not saying I liked and didn't like the book almost equally. There it is. It's not, I hated the book, but I'll talk more about that. What did you think of the book, Joe?
I liked it in the sense that it's very simple and pretty easy. So it's not like you're not going to get a super ton from it. It's kind of like one concept that is expanded on, which sometimes is fine in some of these books. There's some books that try and do way too much, and then there's some that they have their one thing and it just goes through it ad nauseum. At least this book, it wasn't very long. He kind of told you what it was about, what he's trying to get you to do. It's not going to fix everything in your life, but it could be it's a useful tool in your tool belt to use for what it's worth. So there wasn't any grand proclamations of this is going to turn your entire life around, but it could help certain areas, which I think was good. So I like that preface a little bit, and just knowing what you're getting into, to me, it makes a big difference. So some of the couple of points that I really, really liked was the inner self-talk, the negative self-talk he goes into. A lot of things that would hold people back. What he finds is in these clients that he has is that they get into negative self-talk while they're in the position or the sport or whatever that they're doing, and that's what's holding them back. So creating an alter ego self eliminates that self-talk, because you're not talking about yourself, you're doing what this other person's doing, or you are your alter ego. So that negative self-talk kind of goes away. And this has come up in other books and in studies of having positive self-talk and visualization and and all of that. So the negative self-talk place, I think, was really, really good, because confidence can be everything, especially in performance and what you're doing. even from the smallest thing to the biggest. So that part I liked. And then his part about, being more intentional about who needs to show up. So whatever you're doing, you need to make sure you are in the right mindset to do that specific thing and not anything else. Be very intentional to what you're doing. And I think this can apply specifically for garage gym athletes because, like, when you're going to the gym, you have your 5 blocks to work out in. You need to be intentional about what you're doing in the gym and like block everything else out. This is the time to do that. You should try and just, visualization and um being present in the tasks you're doing. So then you're going to be getting more out of, the training or whatever thing you need to do for that set period of time. And then you click back to your normal self and whatever else you're going on in your life. So those are just two things that I will point out. But Ashley.
So I kind of liked this book just because it's different from how I would tackle mindset. He is all about, it's almost like creativity, right? And for me, that's a little, I'm not going to say I'm not creative. I'm creative in different ways, but I would have never thought up of this, of creating an alter self in order to then make yourself better. He talked a lot about layers here too. Like he started with your core self and the possibility, and then he like expounds upon those layers and I think it's core drivers, belief layer, action layer, and then the field of play, right? And then to Joe's point, when he's talking about the whole negative self-talk, he talked a lot about its suppression. He called it your trap self, that you are basically like suppressing yourself from achieving a goal, essentially. So his maneuver around that was positive emotion and building confidence. So he called that your heroic self, right? And then one big thing that I really loved about this book was I really enjoyed the moments of impact because he talked about target mapping. And again, it's talking about you take a goal and then you define that goal and then you work backwards from that big goal and plan that out to reach the ultimate goal, I guess, which we've kind of done within our own team when there's been times like at the beginning of the year, Jerred's given us some really cool goal sheets, and it's always the 10-year goal that gets me, right? I'm like, oh, I don't know what I want to do in 10 years. But if you can like reach something and then work your way back and like start smaller, I don't know. I think you can actually figure out what you want to do in 5 to 10 years, even longer. But the cool idea for this book, again, is it's another great resource for mindset. I never would have thought about this whole alter ego in order to combat any negative emotions or something that is preventing me from achieving my goals. And we always talk about envisioning, and this is just a different way of envisioning, right? We talked a lot about saying things out loud and like seeing yourself doing things. This is just a cool, creative way to change it up, I think. Kyle.
So I think this is going to affect different people in different ways, and maybe that's an obvious statement. Maybe all books do that. But I think there are certain people who, especially when they think about, because he's talking about performance. Right. And he's talking about, he works with a lot of high level performers in business, in sports, all that kind of stuff. And so he talks about helping them develop alter egos to help them perform in their field of play, right? Whatever it is that they're doing. And basically kind of being a different person on the court versus off the court. Right. And I think this is different for certain people. I think certain people can just turn it on and just do what they need to do. And all of it is just that one person. Some people have a hard time doing that though, so, and he talks a lot about that. He talks a lot about people who have confidence issues, they, for various things, and that's something that stuck out to me. He talked about, coming from a small town and not being, not coming from a family who, was very successful, or had a lot of money or things like that, and I think those are barriers that people deal with, and some people deal with them in different ways. Some people are just like, I'm going to go smash it, and that's just what I'm going to do. And some people need different strategies. And so I think people who can just get in that mindset and go do it and go get it done, this book isn't for you. You don't need it. You know what I mean? But people who really do have confidence issues, or they have those barriers, they have those things that are getting in their way, those negative, thoughts about themselves, and negative truths that they've told themselves of, like, I'm not supposed to be successful because nobody else is successful around me and things like that. Like, this would be really helpful for you. But something that I also feel like this is kind of something that we all kind of do in a way, with the whole alter ego thing. I think especially when you first meet another person, I don't think that you present to that person exactly who you are, right? I think you're giving that person an alter ego from the get-go, and they're giving you one back too. And I think at least some of us are not this way. Some of us are just open, and it's just, we are who we are. And, everybody that we meet, they know exactly who we are, but then other people are like, well, I have this person at work, and the people at work see me do this, and they think this about me, and this is how I act at work. And then this is how I act with my friends. This is how I act at church. This is how I act with my family. This is how I act specifically with my spouse. Like, my spouse sees, somebody that, a version of me that other people don't see, things like that. So I think this is something that we kind of all naturally do, but this book gives you a way to be intentional about driving that natural practice into something, and specifically using it to increase performance. So, and one last thing that I took away from it, he talks about naming your enemy. So the thing that is holding you back, the thing that is getting in the way, the thing that is constantly trying to pull you back and keep you from doing what it is that you're wanting to do, or even doing what it is that you feel you're supposed to do, you're made to do, things like that. You give it a name, and he talks to you about how to do that. He has an entire process of understanding what your enemy is, understanding what your barriers are, and then you give it a name. So I kind of thought that was cool as well, of like naming it, like giving it a specific designation so that you can know exactly what it is. Anyway, Jerred.
Yeah, so I have very similar takeaways to you, Kyle. I think, because I look at it when I'm kind of reviewing a book, I do look at it in two ways. I look at it from a subjective, what did I think about it? And then more of an objective, how could this be helpful to other people, independent of my opinions of the process or the idea. And so objectively, I agree 100% with what Kyle said. So if you are someone who struggles with a lot of negative self-talk, you have trouble, like Kyle said, flipping the switch, turning it on, and all those things, a lot of insecurities, and none of these things are bad. We all have them. I'm just saying, if you know that you're like in a place where you're struggling with a lot of that stuff, this could be a great book, The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman. It could be a great book for you to pick up. I think from a psychological standpoint, the strategies that he talks about are very similar, like I'm in parallel with a lot of the things that we talk about. I mean, one of the chapters, I don't even think I wrote the chapter down, but like he was basically describing Meet Yourself Saturday to me. He was talking about being able to like get to this place where you have this inner dialogue with yourself. I mean, that's the whole premise behind Meet Yourself Saturday. It's not just to do a hard workout. It's to take your body to a place, because you don't get there very often, and most people don't get there every day. It's occasional, where you get to this place where you actually have the voice in your head that is telling you to do something that's different than what you think you want to do. And it's an opportunity for you to control that conversation in your brain and essentially shut down that negative self-talk. And my belief is that if you do this enough, it's going to go into every area of your life where these thoughts you'll realize are not truly you. And if you go down a deep enough path into mindset and meditation and all these things, that's one of my biggest takeaways, having gone down all those paths, are you are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Like, you might have some crazy thoughts. They're not you. They're just thoughts. Other people have had these thoughts. You're having the thoughts. The thoughts are what they are, but they're not who you are. That's not what a thought is. A thought is just something that comes up. You can choose to let go of that thought, act on it, whatever you want. And so I feel like he had a lot of phenomenal, like I said, psychological strategies. I think this book would be great for a lot of people. So that's my objective opinion of it. My subjective opinion, I think it's weird. I think it's a little bit odd. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I don't want to sit around and pretend I'm someone else to tackle situations that I feel unprepared for. I would rather tell myself I can be better. I want my alter ego to be me, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, even if I'm not actually at the standard of what I want me to be, I want my alter ego to be a different version of me that's better than who I am, if that makes sense, as opposed to pretending to be someone else. That's why I think that that's a little bit unhealthy. And this is just going, like I said, I gave you my objective. Now we're jumping to subjective, Jerred Moon's opinion. I feel like it's a bit unhealthy to be like, you know what? I want to be more like Joe Courtney in this situation. And like, I'd rather just be me. Let's just be me in this situation and see how I tackle it. And if I don't feel like I'm doing a good job, how can I get better, as opposed to being someone else, or like being Superman or Batman. I feel like these things are it's just very weird to me. It's very unusual. I don't think that for me, that would put me in a healthy mindset to pretend to be someone else. And even if it's just in situations, you know, like small situations, I feel like I would rather just be me and try and be a better version of that person. And then he gets into totems, and that's where I just had to like shut it down. I was like, okay, we're not in agreement on the execution of some of these things. I'm kind of out. And I feel like some of his examples didn't land. Like he brought up the Churchill and like wearing different hats. Which hat am I going? Like, I don't feel like he should have tried to bend Churchill wearing a different hat to this alter ego thing, because I don't really feel like that's what Churchill is doing. It's like Churchill wanted to be Churchill. He wanted to be the best version of Churchill. And he just wanted to know, like putting on different glasses as Martin Luther King, you're trying to give off like it's like wearing clothes. Like instead of wearing rags, you're going to wear something nicer to certain meetings. That's not an alter ego. That's just things that you do. Like these are things that you do. Like it doesn't mean that you're trying to be someone else. So for me, I think if I were to regularly practice this, it would put me in a worse mental state than I'm currently in. Because it would make me feel like I'm not actually good enough for any of the situations I'm walking into. So I need to pretend to be someone else. And so that's my personal opinion of the book. But ultimately, all the things that he's talking about are great. Negative self-talk, let's get rid of that. Let's, really control who we are in different situations. Let's make ourselves better, like all these other things. But his execution is not one that I personally agree with overall.
I think that was his ultimate goal, right? Was to make you get better. And I don't necessarily think it's meant to be like, hey, Ashley, you be Joe, or you be Kyle, or you be Jerred. I think it's more of like, what is something that you're struggling with, whether it be confidence or something. And then let's pretend that you are actually good at that. I don't know. I took it very differently than you did, Jerred. And
didn't he at the end say, start with a list of your mentors? Like that's a good place to start, was like with a list of your mentors, because all the other examples are like, yeah, be Batman, be a vicious dog, be, like, okay, I get it. But then when he jumped to like actual people, mentors, I was like, now this is getting weird. Like, why would I why would I want to just be someone who's in my life who I see as a mentor? Like, I'd just be me. Like, I'll just be me in this role. How about that? And I'll be better if I suck at it, and I'll just get better at it. It definitely, the interpretations for each one of us could be different. That was just, does anyone see what I'm saying though? Like, do you guys feel that way?
I hear what you're saying. Sorry.
I'm familiar with you. So I had a feeling that was going to be your takeaway anyway, especially when you said, well, I loved it and I hated it. And I'm like, okay, I better know what he's going to say here. But at the same time, something he talks about in the book, he talks about Beyonce, right? And he talks about Beyonce developed this alter ego.
Beyonce fierce.
To be someone else so that she could, launch her career. And then eventually she stopped calling herself that alter ego because she became who that was, and so it was kind of like a self-actualization type thing of like, well, I don't have to pretend to be this other person now because I've become who that person was. And now that's just me. That's me now. And so I don't need the alter ego anymore. And so I think but that's what I was saying. Like, some people don't need that practice. Some people just see it as, I need to be better. I'm going to go get better. And that's just me. You know what I mean? And there are things but that also comes with like knowing your lane and knowing, staying in your lane and knowing what it is that you're going to accomplish and things like, and you're not deviating from the path that you have for your life, right? Like this is what I do. I'm not trying to be anything else. I'm not trying to do anything else. This is what I'm going to be. and I need to get better at being that. And so I'm going to be that, you know what I mean?
Right.
Versus there are some people who they're forced into situations they want to be, you know, a performer in some way, like in their job or in their sport or whatever, but they need a different strategy to become what it is that they need to become. And so that, to me, that's, some people don't need it. And that's kind of what I said in my break, was like, some people don't need to read this book. If you just feel like, hey, I just need to be better at this, and that's going to be me, don't read this book. It's not for you. But then other people, they need different strategies than that.
It is a very creative strategy. And one of the points I wrote down was my notes was, it's the epitome of fake it until you make it. It's like,
it's true.
Like in your Beyonce thing is like, just, let's just pretend to be this person over and over until eventually you are that person. And I think that's actually what happens if you've been on a self-development journey for long enough, because maybe when you start self-development, you know, and I'm talking about reading books regularly, meditating, praying, like all these things on a regular basis that people don't do. And so you start doing those things every single day. Well, when you're 10, 15 years into that practice, you probably are a different person than when you started on the first day. You know, and so you just are completely different. You weren't using an alter ego to get that way. You just became a different person through practice. But if an alter ego gets you there faster, it's definitely, like I said, it's a parallel path to the same place.
Yep.
Cool.
Barbell ratings.
Oh, barbell ratings. Yeah. Sorry. Let me get out my calculator so I can do the hard math of averaging out 4 people.
Oh no.
Ashley, what's your rating for this one?
I give it a 3.5.
3.5. All right, Kyle.
I'm going to give it a 4, actually. I resonated with it a little bit more than other people, I think. It wasn't like, and I think my reasoning for that was like, it's not mind-blowing to me like other books that we read. And so that's why it doesn't get a 5. It was creative, and it's an interesting concept and things like that. And I kind of resonated with kind of what he was saying, but it wasn't like a mind-blowing, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, so I'm not giving it that. So also he talked a lot about comic book characters and stuff. So I'm like, I'm cool with that. Like, I think that might be another reason why you didn't like it that much, Jerred. You're not really,
I didn't know what he was talking about.
Not really a fiction guy. Anyway.
All right, Joe, what's your rating?
A 3. I think I also really like the concepts, but kind of like Jerred, I'm not going to pretend I'm somebody else. I'd rather work on my own mindset shift and realize what's going on with myself and fix that versus pretending to be somebody else, because it's not really completely fixing the problem. You're just kind of putting a Band-Aid over it. But the concepts and everything else, I think the apply now thing, I think appeals to me a lot with all these books, to where you can read the book and you can act on it right away as you're still reading the book, which I think is really good. So 3 out of 5.
I just can't even. I'm gonna like walk into my gym today and be like, I'm not Jerred today.
Oh, stop.
I'm a fierce lion trainer. I can't honestly do it. I can't do it. I can't even.
So many
and that's
years
okay.
of mental
that's okay.
practice that like you have made.
I'm just saying, I don't want to knock it until you tried it type thing, but I'm saying I feel like I can't even try it. I would like, imposter syndrome. It would be reverse imposter syndrome. I'd be like, yeah, okay, you're this person today in the gym. I'd be like, no, you're not. You're not that guy. Like, what are you talking?
Like, I envisioned yourself like, if it's like a hard workout and you can't get it done, have you ever envisioned like you're competing against somebody else, or have you ever like, I don't know, I'm just like throwing stuff out because never mind. You're just different. It's fine.
But I feel like a lot of us are agreeing here. Joe's agreeing with me. He's just being more silent. Kyle's on the fence, and I don't know where you land. Can't tell yet.
I don't. No. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, but let's, like, if we were to try this, where would you try it out? And then I'll give my rating. Like, if you were to try this today, what area of your life, if you don't mind sharing, would you be like, you know what, let's try out an alter ego in this area of my life? Like, where would you try that? How would you do it?
Honestly, as I was reading it, one of the biggest fields of play that I want to improve, to use his terminology, fields of play. I want to be a better dad. And there was an Army officer that one of his talks that he was given, that pulled him aside and specifically asked him about that. He was like, I'm solid here, but like, I'm still like a military dude. Like I'm still ordering my kids around like they're my soldiers, you know what I mean? And it's like, and I don't want to be that guy. Like I want to be different when I'm at home, and I don't treat my kids that way. I'm not in the military, but I'm just saying like, I want to be a better dad. You know what I mean? So if I was going to implement it, I would try to implement it somehow, being a better dad. That's where.
But like, who would you like envision someone in particular, or like a thing, or like what?
I would probably envision my dad, actually try to be more like him. I would probably, because I feel like there's a lot of ways that I'm not like him that I need to be, you know what I mean? And treat my kids the way that he treated me. And as I was growing up. So I would probably envision him and try to be him more, and maybe even like pretend to be him, maybe certain things about him that I would like to change about myself. I would try to emulate that.
It's a good one, Kyle. And Joe, Ashley, care to share how you would try this out today if you were to try it out?
Mine would be for
go ahead.
Mine would be for praise team. Scott and I are on praise team, and he plays the keyboard and I sing, and I do some solos sometimes. And I come from a very choral background, so I sing with other people. I'm good with harmonizing and stuff, but when I have to do solos, I will say that like, I don't know what it is, but I just get very, very nervous. I shake. It's just not my most favorite thing. So that would probably be an area that, I mean, I've got a pool of people that I can envision being, not nervous Nellie Ashley, but, something else. But I think for me, the focus would be, what are the attributes I want to do? So that way, like, I can feel confident when I go on stage. I don't know. It's not necessarily like, I want to be like Beyonce, or I want to be like so-and-so. I want to be myself, but
well,
I want
it's like, was it last week I talked about the building Superman example where you talk, but it's just building a better version of yourself. So it's not like I disagree with the idea. It's just that I just think it's odd to like use someone else. But yeah, if you're like, this is the Ashley that I need to be to step into this performance. And then now it's almost like a goal, like something you aspire to, this different version of yourself that has the traits that you want. Like, I have no problems with that. And like, I also don't want anyone listening to this think like, oh, I'm perfect. No one's better. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like I have a lot of shortcomings, a lot of areas, but I just want to be a better version of myself in those areas. Right. And I want to identify those weaknesses and improve them, and not pretend to be someone else in the process.
Right. And you just use different practices. Correct.
Yeah, I think this is just a path to do the exact same thing. I think some people can do that, and then some people need just a different strategy to do the exact, like I said, like eventually you become Superman, you build Superman, you become who it is you were trying to be, but you just have different paths to get there and strategies to do that. Joe didn't answer the question.
Probably say here, podcasting and public speaking. I just want to be Jerred Moon. That's it.
Hey, I already said I wanted to be you on this podcast. So
we already wear the same size clothes, so we don't even have to swap.
You guys were in the same room podcasting last week. So
yeah. That was tough.
It's already happening. You didn't even know.
Okay, so if I were to use this, it wouldn't be in a regular garage gym training session, but I could probably try it. I would use it in fitness. Big shocker there. I'd probably use it in a track session, like doing really hard intervals, mainly because I just finished reading, I mentioned last week too, The Perfect Mile, which was a phenomenal book. But yeah, I didn't mention it. Maybe like, how would Roger Bannister tackle these intervals? Something like, maybe I could go there in some of those ways is somewhere I could try and use it and see if it would be helpful. My ultimate rating is a 3. I'm not giving it something too bad. Like I said, objectively, I think it had a lot of good stuff. So that brings the average for the team to 3.375.
Fractional plates.
Yeah. Where's my 375 plate?
Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know enough about fractional plates. I'm sorry. I would have used a couple 1.25s, right?
I will ask you 2 more.
All right, so that's the book. Go grab it or don't. I don't know. Sorry, Todd. I don't know. Whatever. All right, we'll get into the. Yeah.
Let's get into a way that you can make yourself better.
Okay, we have a challenge. Meet Yourself Saturday workout. Kyle's going to brief it, but it's a new tradition. I love forced traditions. Those are the best kind of traditions. And so around Thanksgiving, we have the Geometro Thanksgiving Throwdown. That workout has nothing to do with Thanksgiving whatsoever. Don't even know why it is around that time, but that's what we do during Thanksgiving around here. It's one tradition we have here. Now we're forcing a second one, and it is the abdominal snowman.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. We're gonna have a shirt. Trampus is working on that as of right now. We should have the shirt by the time all this publishes, I would hope. Trampus. Anyway, so there we go. Kyle's gonna brief it, and it's a challenge workout for everyone this holiday season.
So you guys know that, or if you don't know, that you're about to find out that we are all about simple, not easy around here. And this is about as simple, not easy as it gets. It's accumulate 30 minutes in the front leaning rest position in the least amount of time as possible. Obviously, it's a minimum of 30 minutes. So you're going to spend at least 30 minutes doing this. If you can do 30 minutes unbroken in the front leaning rest, I don't know, maybe you get another t-shirt or something. So each time you leave the front leaning rest position, you start a running clock. Each time you leave the front leaning rest position, you pause the timer, and you can rest for however long you choose to rest. Do whatever you need to do. But then when you get back in the front leaning rest position, you start the timer. The timer is only running when you are in the front leaning rest position. You continue that until you've accumulated 30 minutes total in the front leaning rest. There is a 60-minute time cap.
So you do need we kind of discussed today, you need 2 ways of keeping time, right? Like, because there's a 60-minute cap, you're accumulating time. So if you get out of the front leaning rest position, you have to stop that time. So if you have a second stopwatch, or you just know, like I mentioned to the team, like the Garmin has, when you go to the actual stopwatch feature, it says the time at the top, like it's 2 p.m., right, but it'll keep the time, and I can stop that as much as I want. So it's easier to do accumulated time in that way. So either have a clock, like an actual time clock, or 2 stopwatches to be able to do this one. But yeah, accumulate 30 total minutes in the front leaning rest. If you didn't know, front leaning rest is the top of the push-up position. So none of us having done it yet, but I'm sure we all will. Right, Joe? You're going to, come on.
Hey, this one needs no equipment. You can do it now.
Yeah.
You can do it in your current,
I threw out a lot of ways we could make this a lot harder, and I didn't do it. And in hopes that Joe would tell us how it goes next week. But anyway, what tips do we have?
Are you thinking, or
I'll go first?
I'm thinking. I'm sorry, I was thinking.
Don't dip the hips towards the ground. Okay. This is more of like a standard of movement. You should have a very rigid midline. Like, you don't want the butt in the air. You don't want to sag the hips towards the ground. But it's actually going to end up hurting your lower back. If you have bad form here and you have bad form for 30 minutes in this position, you're going to have to go see a chiropractor, or a physical therapist. You're going to have a problem, you're going to have an injury. I just hope everyone's hearing me. Like, it's going to be a problem to do that for that long with poor form. So make sure that you have really good form throughout this. If that means you have to take more breaks than you'd like, that's fine. But keep your form rigid and stable, because I don't want to hurt your back. If you're tightening your core and everything's tight and you are rigid, it's just going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be, bad for you. And so that's the only thing I have there is really try not to, if you're sticking the butt in your ear, that's almost like a rest. That's just cheating, but it's worse to have hips towards the ground, because it's going to put unnecessary strain in your lower back. So that's all I have is the form. Keep really good form.
Yeah, so that's something I would say as well. If you get into more of a pike position, get your hips up too far, like you're out of front leaning rest, which means you should be stopping the timer. So really, I would say, to Jerred's point, as opposed to going into a compromised position, either with sinking the hips or elevating the hips, rather than doing that, just go to your knees or just stand up. Like, if you're gonna break, if you're gonna stop, then just stop, do a full stop. Don't try to game it or in any way by like, oh, well, I'm not in the perfect position, but I'm going to stay down here and try to eke out a few more seconds. Like, just stop the timer and take a rest, and then get back down and make sure you're doing it in a proper form. I would also say Metallica. Do it. Metallica.
This is an audiobook 100% workout for me. This is just, what are you getting pumped up for? You're getting pumped up for some isometric contractions? Like, come on, let's just
are you
just
kidding
listen
me?
to an audiobook.
Like
take my brain out of here.
No way. That's when music is huge for me, is when when I'm in a hold, 100%. I'm singing that verse. I'm not even, no. Oh,
some of us use different things to go to remove our brains from the situation.
Big takeaway from this podcast is people are different.
Especially, certain people. All right.
It doesn't even matter what song you put on for Metallica, because they all sound the same.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, here we
go.
go.
On repeat.
Here we go.
So glad that made it back. Yes, full circle.
He was asking for it.
Yeah, he wanted it.
I'll just get into my tips. So I kind of have two things to say. The first one is just knowing somewhat of a plan. So like if you do 1 minute on, 1 minute off the entire time, keep that pace, then you will make the time cap. But knowing that if you stray from that or like any less, then you're not going to make it. So just kind of know about that going through. I wouldn't really recommend going 5 to 7 minutes right out the gate, and then you can't hold it after that. So that's just up to you to determine. But my actual tip is externally rotate your hands out. So instead of your fingers being pointed straight in front of you, point them at about 45 degrees or so outwards, because your shoulders are at a stronger position when you're externally rotated versus internally. I know a lot of people, when they do push-ups, their hands are straight forward, but you should really rotate them out some, because your shoulders will be locked in a little bit better and you'll be at a stronger position for your shoulders.
I mean, I don't have much to add. I would just find some tunes that you can go somewhere, or an audiobook or whatever, and like because I'm interested to see what people's heart rates will do this, because like with static holds, my heart rate can shoot up sometimes. It just depends. Like, so accumulating this, I'm interested to see where everyone's going to land, like what different zones people will touch just from being in a front leaning rest. So
my curse words shoot up, that's for sure.
Well, that's actually a big debate in the energy system world, is isometric contractions and heart rate, because it doesn't adhere to typical energy system and heart rate stuff. So I wish we could do a large
we're doing it
unofficial study. Yeah, I'd have to have everybody report their heart rate, average heart rate for the entire team. If you want to like just throw that somewhere on Facebook, let me know, because my heart rate does the opposite of Ashley's. When I'm in an isometric contraction, it will lower, and so, but my muscles still burn and it still sucks, right? So it's not like it's, oh, this is easy. It's still hard. So it's a weird thing to have happen. But I like Joe's thing, 1 on, 1 off, I think is great. But then just like try and kill it at the end. Go at least like a 5 minute, 10 minute straight, something like that. But that's it for this one. We'll get out of here. Try the abdominal snowman. And for everyone who's been around for training and took part of Black Friday, all those things, really appreciate you, everyone, for supporting what we do. If you're here still listening, not a part of this somehow, go sign up for a 14-day free trial at GarageGymAthlete.com. And remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.
To the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to GarageGymAthlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.